Hey guys, it's Jay from Callout. We're going to tell you a bunch of things that can help you get ready for the studio if you're going to the studio for the first time, or maybe this is another time going back. These are just some tips and tricks to help you kind of get on top of getting into the studio and making your studio experience as streamlined and effective as possible. This band as a whole has done 2 studio runs, at least as a whole. We've done 1 EP in the studio and then 1 full length in the studio, and then every member in this band has done a few other studio projects, be it being a session musician or going in and recording other projects here and there or whatever. We've all been in the studio a few times. So these are going to be a bunch of tips and tricks that we as a band think will help make your studio experience better. Make sure you demo all of your tracks before you get to the studio. This is going to save you a lot of time and a lot of money. You do not want to go to the studio unprepared and have to start doing scratch tracks or demoing these things that could have been done ahead of time and taking away from your actual recording time. Make sure you go into the studio prepared with a demo track that's been played to a metronome and is exactly or basically as close to as possible what you want the final product to sound like. That way, you can bring it to your producer and you can say, okay, 8 bars in, that's the intro. 16 bars in, we have our verse. 32 bars in, that's our chorus. So you can separate each part of the song and they can create a session file or project file exactly as it should look. That way they're not spending 15 to 20 minutes going, okay, lay me down markers. Where is this happening? Where is this happening? Is that a tempo change? Is that a key signature change? What do I have to make here? What's going on? You want them to be able to follow a map. If you have that all done ahead of time, you're going to save a lot more time in the studio, you're going to save money, and you're going to get all the recording done much faster. Another big thing that you need to do when you're in the studio is be practiced and have the entire band know what's happening. No one should be going in and trying to write their parts while they're there, and honestly, we are guilty of this. You want everyone to be very practiced. You want everyone to be on top of what they're doing. You want everyone to be able to come in and just record with all their stuff done and ready to go. You don't want anyone coming in and trying to figure out what they should be playing or taking 20 takes to get something right. Everything should be practiced and written before you get into the studio.
I made an accident and it sounded cool.
The more time you spend taking extra takes or trying to figure stuff out, the more time you're taking away from improving upon or really tracking everything else that needs to get done. So when studio shopping, you need to come up with a budget that is affordable to each of you as members, but is also realistic. Keep in mind that whatever producer you're paying also has their own life and they need to buy groceries and pay rent. So if you're gonna go in to a studio and expect to spend $500 or $1,000 and that producer is gonna give you all of their time in the world, you're sadly mistaken and you're probably not gonna get the product that you're looking for. You need to be realistic with what you're spending and what you expect to get out. So shopping for a studio, you need to think about, are we going in? Is this our first EP that we're ever releasing? Is this our 3rd album and we really want to up the game here? You need to go in thinking about what it is that you're trying to accomplish and what you think that studio is going to be able to give you. When you go studio shopping, you should tour multiple studios and really see what feels like the best fit for you. And you should also try to keep in mind what that studio is probably going to charge. Something that has high-end microphones and a huge set of amplifiers and cabs and everything's going to be done in-house for you, and they're going to track all of your live drums, and they're going to spend 4 weeks on your album with you or 3 months on your album with you. Whatever it is, whatever ridiculous constraints you're going to work within or they're going to offer you, you need to be able to realize, is that something you need and is it something you can afford? Something else while studio shopping is finding a producer that complements your personality as well as your genre and your music. If you're an artist that wants everything done your way and you know what you want done, you should find a producer that's willing to just go in and record you and mix you, and you're gonna get your product and you know what you're getting. If you don't know exactly what you're going for and you want to involve your sound a little bit more while you're in the studio, You need to find a producer with a creative personality that wants to help you grow and is gonna throw weird ideas at you and make you record a bunch of weird stuff because it might work, it might not. Keep in mind that if you go with a more creative choice, you're gonna spend more money and more time doing these creative things that might make the whole project more expensive. Something else you need to think about when you go into a studio is the timing and your timeline. Do not go into the studio and all of a sudden start promoting your album saying, okay, new album's coming out in 2 months on your first day of tracking. Because I can almost guarantee you that that album is going to be coming out 6 months after you start tracking minimum. It will not be out in 2 months, I promise. Keep in mind that your producer has their own life and stuff just happens. Regardless of what timeline you set up with them, you never can account for injury or sickness or something happens monetarily or financially with somebody, or life events just happen that get in the way of things. Something might happen while you're tracking and all of a sudden you need to track an extra week because God forbid the hard drive crashed or someone got injured and they can't make it to the practice or to the recording time. God forbid your producer gets injured and they just can't work on the album for 3 weeks. Stuff happens and your timeline will always get pushed back. Keep that in mind when you go into the studio. It's great to use the studio as a social media backing to really talk about, hey, we're here, we're working on things, it's coming soon, but do not release any dates or anything until you have a final product in hand, until you have mastered files in your hand ready to be released. Something that is so important when you go into the studio is being able to play to a metronome. This is something that everyone as a musician should be able to do to some degree inherently, but not being able to play to a metronome is going to throw off your whole project, your whole workflow, everything about it. You need to go in as prepared as possible, knowing your songs and having them down tight, but also having them down to a metronome. This is for multiple reasons. One, when a producer is working on an album, if everything can be played to a metronome and is on time with the project file, that's going to make cutting and moving pieces around much easier if it has to happen. It's going to make lining up snares and kick drums much easier and much more effective, and and the only way to get the project truly in time is if you're playing to a metronome. I have seen people come in and say, I'll just play by feel. And to some degree that works if that's the style you want. But if you're looking to get something that's very polished and really, really clean and very touched up, if that's your style, you're not going to get that without being able to play to a metronome. Something to do before you get to the studio is making sure all of your guitars and all of your gear is up to date and maintenanced well. Everything's set up. Make sure all of your guitars are set up. Make sure all of your strings have been changed. For the drummers, change all of your heads. Get new cymbals if you need to. Make sure all of your amps and whatever you bring to the studio works, and you're not going to have something crap out on you when you're starting to track. When you get to the studio and none of your stuff is set up, you're going to spend a whole day or at least an hour to 2 to 3 hours just setting your stuff up, which could be time put towards tracking. Time is money when you're in the studio, and you do not want to be spending time on unnecessary things, especially things that could have been prevented or done ahead of time. So changing your strings, setting up your guitars, making sure everything is in tune, it works, getting new heads on your drums. What else? Is there anything else I'm forgetting for that? This one's going to be for vocalists. Vocal training and vocals vary a lot from person to person. Being trained for the studio is vastly different than playing on stage or performing. You're not going to have a crowd in front of you and you get to do a million takes and it's great. You get to be very controlled. You need to practice all of your vocal parts comfortably in an empty room, in a soundproof room with just yourself. It's not the same as playing with a band, and while you will be singing to the music, it's a different tone and it's a different feeling. If you are singing harmonies yourself, or if your band is singing harmonies, everyone needs to be practiced on them. You should be practiced on your own harmonies, or the band should know exactly what they're doing going in ahead of time. You don't want to be writing vocal parts, lyrics, or harmonies in studio if it can be avoided. Being on time is one of the most important things you can do for the studio. I mean, every studio works differently and you might have different sessions. For us, we were doing 8-hour blocks from 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. every night. Being on time is so important because you do not want to get there at 7:30 or 7:45 and all of a sudden an hour of your tracking time is gone. Sometimes you'll have a nice producer and they'll give you that hour for free, kind of, not really, but they'll just kind of go over the time at the end or they'll keep working. But you don't want to take that away from them. Keeping your producer happy is the key to making a good record. They're the ones who control everything you're doing. Your engineers and your producers, if they don't like you, even though they're getting paid, you don't want to just pay them to do the work. You want them to enjoy the work. So you want to be as hospitable and friendly towards them as they are to you. And you really want to make sure they're on your good side because you want them to take the time to make the album good. You don't want them to just do it for the money. So being on time, being friendly to your producers, it's all very important in the grand scheme of everything. Again, when you go into the studio, it's a creative process. You might want to record instruments that you don't have access to on a normal basis, or you might want to try things that you've never tried before. Make sure that you have some idea of what that is before you get there. You don't want to be there writing those parts. If you say, hey, we want to add shaker here, or we want to add bongos or something, and you don't have those instruments at home, at least kind of have an idea of what you're doing before you get there, and you're not just tacking on random things. That way, you at least have a direction. It's fine to try new things in the studio. I mean, we spent a good deal of time just recording weird sounds just to see if they would work, but at least have a concept or an idea of where those sounds are going to fit in, and not just recording them for the sake of recording them. It's important to be respectful to your producer and realize that they're a person and not just someone there to make your album. This is someone who wants to work with you, but they're also getting paid, so it's a job on top of being a creative endeavor. When I say be respectful to them, I mean be respectful of their workflow and be respectful to them as a person. Sometimes stuff happens where there's a ton of traffic and your producer gets there 15 minutes late. It's okay. Like, don't blow up on your producer. Don't get into fights with them. They're the ones doing the album. You got to live with them. They're helping you. They're working with you. They're your friend. Also, being respectful of their workflow. When producers are mixing or maybe editing something, like they heard something that was wrong in the song, or they're trying to correct a note, or maybe putting all the drums on time, or just making little adjustments, don't be like behind them, like backseat driving what they're doing. And also, try not to distract them from their work. They're your friend, but they're also someone working, and it's very hard for someone to edit drums and get them on time if there's 4 people behind them laughing and making jokes and constantly going, hey, have you heard this story? Hey, have you seen this? Hey, you know, it's taken away from what they're doing. And a lot of the studio time you'll find is just sitting there and doing nothing. And that's kind of how you'll fill it, well, by watching videos and making jokes and whatnot. And that's fine. Just make sure that you know when your producer is working and when they're socializing. There will be plenty of time for both. Just make their lives easy. On top of that, being respectful of who you bring into the studio. When you're in the studio, you're gonna want your friends and your family to come in and see what it looks like, and, oh, you're in a studio, it's great, look at all this gear, look at all this expensive stuff, we're making an album, hooray! Be respectful of the fact that your producer is still doing work, and also a lot of these people aren't gonna be starstruck by it, and also it's fun for about 20 minutes until they realize that there's nothing for them to do, and they just get bored and sit on the couch. It's fine to bring in friends, it's fine to bring in family to see what you're doing, but try to keep it to a minimum of people at a time and not distracting from your producer's workflow. Alright guys, so that's some stuff you can do before getting into the studio or while you're at the studio. I hope it helps. This video should be good for anyone who's going into the studio for the first time or is going back and is looking to record again. Just some things that you may have overlooked before you're going back. Let us know in the comments what your studio experiences have been like, and we'll see you next time.